Hello, everyone. I'm Andre, your host. Welcome to tonight's show of Sports Talks at Caio Serrano. This evening, we'll be discussing with Hugo Paris from Schweele Law Office, a colleague of mine, and Quinten from CRESTA, with who I did my master at ISDE, the early termination of championships in France and Belgium due to COVID-19. Before we get in the subject, I kindly ask Hugo to briefly introduce himself, and afterwards, Quinten. Hugo, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Andre, for the invite. Hi, everyone. As Andre said, my name is Hugo Paris. I'm working with him at Schweele Law Office here in our office in Lisbon. I'm working here now for a bit more than a year. Did an internship last year in our Bergen office for 6 months, and then I'm back here since January this year. So about me, I don't know if it's redundant to say as a lawyer working in sport that I enjoy sport. As a child, I was a big fan of sport, all kind of sport. Actually wanted to be a sports journalist, but then started law studies after high school with having in mind to become a sports agent. And I was lucky enough to have a first experience with a sports lawyer in my 3rd year of law, in the cabinet, in the law firm Ellipse Avocat in Lyon. And that lawyer convinced me to pursue studies in order to become a lawyer. I passed the bar exam in France recently in December, and I'm not qualified lawyer yet, but I will enter the lawyer school in Paris starting from January next year. So in order to be qualified lawyer in a bit more than 2 years from now. What else? I was lucky enough last year to participate in a CAS hearing in Lausanne with the partner of the firm, Jan Schweele and Georg Freuse. This year again we had a hearing, but because of COVID-19, it was done remotely from our home. And yeah, that's it. I will be speaking about the end of the championship in France, both 1st and 2nd division. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you, Hugo. Now we leave the floor to Quinten, so he briefly introduces himself to our followers, so later we discuss the subject.
Thanks, Andre. Thanks for having me, and glad to be here together with Hugo. A few years ago, I graduated my master in laws in Antwerp, and then I decided to pursue my career in sports law, and that's where I met with Andre in ISDE in Madrid. And after that, it went quite fast. So last year, graduated from ISDE, then did an internship of 3 months in Brazil with the office of Daniel Cravo in Porto Alegre. And then I started interning here at the office where I am now at CRESTA in Brussels. First as an intern for a few months, and then I got offered the contract. So right now I'm here an associate lawyer at CRESTA in Brussels, doing my qualifying 3 years to become a qualified lawyer. The things we handle here at the office range to all matters of sports, mainly basketball and football, in which we represent mostly players, some agents, and try to guide them within the traps sometimes that the rude world of sports might be from a contractual point of view. Except for that, I have the same big interest in sport, which is what led me to this industry. And yeah, I think that suffices to say. That's why I'm here, and I can learn everything a bit about what happened due to the COVID in the Belgian professional championships.
Thank you both. This channel is also aimed for that, for people that are interested in sports to join the industry somehow. As you see, this happened to all of us. We had other backgrounds, but we found ourselves doing what we love, and we dedicated as much as we could to fit in. And similar to Hugo, I wanted to be a journalist also in the past, to write about sports. I ended up becoming a lawyer, and I'm glad I did, because I'm working with what I love, with the legal aspects of sports. And today we're going to discuss some legal actions that were taken because of COVID. COVID had an effect on everyone's lives. We've been, lots of us who were working from home for a long time. Governments try to get their populations to avoid big groups of people, to hold the disease and its spreading. And because of that, gatherings such as football stadiums and football matches were prohibited. This all over the world. And lots of countries decided, and their leagues decided, to suspend the championships until further notice, and until the situation could allow games to be played again. But France and Belgium, they took more radical measures, if I may say, by terminating earlier their championship, already declaring it was over and the standings would be as they were. No more games would be played, already aiming towards the following season, for the 2020-2021 season. And I would like to hear from you, Hugo and Quinten, about what happened in France and in Belgium for the early termination of the championships.
Thank you, André. So in France, the last game that was played in the first league was played on 8th of March. There has been no more games since. On Friday, 13th of March, so quickly after the end of the last game was played, the board of the French league decided unanimously, it was a unanimous decision, to suspend both Ligue 1 and Ligue 2 until further notice. So just for sake of clarity, and for people who are not really familiar with French football, so in France we have the French Football Federation, which deals with amateur football from grassroots up to the 3rd division, and we have the Ligue de Football Professionnel, to be translated by French Professional League, which is the organ which deals with the 1st and 2nd division. So when I will be speaking about the league, I don't mean Ligue 1 as the competition itself, but I mean the organ which organizes those competitions. When I refer to Ligue 1, I will just say Ligue 1 and Ligue 2, Ligue 2. So what happened is that between the 13th of March and end of April, it was a period of uncertainty, and no one really knew what was going to happen. And players could not train. They were staying at home in the lockdown, like every other person in France. We were not allowed to leave our house, except for going to groceries or just for physical activities only in a perimeter of 1 kilometer around our house, except for people working in an environment where they had to be present in their work, and of course caretaker and doctors and so on. So on 28th of April, the French Prime Minister announced, and it was a bit of a surprise for everyone, I think. He made a speech about what will be the next move in order to stop slowly the lockdown and to go back to a normal life. And during this speech at the National Assembly, he announced that no professional sport, and no sport in general, but in particular, no professional sport will be allowed to start again this season. So it was not only about football, but as well rugby, handball, basketball, and so on. So it came as a surprise, according to the reaction of the football stakeholders, and it sounds a bit crazy that such a decision was taken without advising or without informing at least the clubs in the league at first. So they learn it like everyone, looking at the live presentation of the French Prime Minister. So 2 days later, on 30th of April, the league decided to end officially, I would say, the 2019-2020 football season for both League One and League Two. There were still 10 games remaining to play at that time in France. Both championship played 28 games. And so as we have 20 teams in both championship, there are still 10 games to be played. So the question was what to do with the league table. Who will be the champion? Will there be any champion? Who will be relegated from League One to League Two? Who will be promoted from League Two to League One? And so some decisions were made. For instance, Lorient, FC Lorient was awarded French champion for League Two, Paris Saint-Germain for League One. And the league decided to promote only the two first teams on the League Two to League One. So Lorient together with Lens, and to relegate Amiens and Toulouse from League One to League Two. So I will discuss later what legal remedies were taken against this decision. And actually, it's a good timing to talk about that, because we are in the middle of some legal proceedings, and we are not involved in any of them, so we can speak about them freely with our own opinion. I say we, Andre and I don't know about Quinten, I don't speak for himself, but Andre and I at our office were not involved, so I can speak freely about that. And I will speak about that a bit later.
Thank you, Hugo, for your impressions. It was a good introduction to the discussion, preparing the grounds for what happened in France. And now, please, Quinten, if you may, in Belgium.
So I'll give a short introduction on how the football is organized in Belgium first, and then say which decisions have been taken to eventually terminate the Belgian Professional Championship. In Belgium, the professional football, it's organized by the so-called Pro League, which is the organization that groups all the interests of the 24 professional clubs in Belgium, and which manages the professional championship, meaning first and second division. This means that within the General Assembly of the Pro League, all the professional clubs, all these 24 professional clubs, have one or more votes, and that any decision intervening in the course of the season has to be made within this General Assembly. Now, when the Belgian government on March 12th announced that there would be lockdown measures such are very similar as the ones in France, that there only could be essential movements and people could only go out to the groceries and to do physical exercise, for example. When this was announced, the Pro League immediately decided to suspend its competition. So to suspend it, but not yet formally terminate it. Now, when did this happen? This happened after 29 rounds of the current regular season were played. 29 rounds out of the 30 rounds that had to be played. And in Belgium, after these 30 rounds, there is a playoff round, which will then determine which teams are champion and which team qualify for the European spots. So right one game before this 30th game, which also decides which team is relegated, the league was suspended. The government then extended the lockdown period several times, and with each time that the lockdown was extended, the Pro League, so this organization of the professional clubs, it extended also the suspension of the championship, but it refrained from taking a formal and official decision with respect to a possible early termination of the 2019-2020 season. Then, in the beginning of April, the board of directors of the Pro League advised that the General Assembly, so the General Assembly being the organ that can take the decision, advised the General Assembly that the championship would be terminated. However, this is just non-binding advice, and I think in countries abroad, this advice has often been reported as the formal termination of the championship, but in fact, this was not yet the championship's real termination. This was just an advice. And despite being advised in the beginning of April 2020, the championship was not being terminated yet. The Pro League was still reluctant to put it to a vote to effectively terminate the season. The reason for this is because the Pro League wanted to be sure that if it terminated the championship, that it could invoke reasons of force majeure, because only when it would invoke reasons for force majeure, it would be protected against potential claims from sponsors and broadcasters. So what the Pro League in fact was doing was postponing the decision to terminate the Belgian championship to then wait for an official governmental decision that says, hey, there will not be any football possible until June 3rd, 2020, being the end of the season. So eventually then, in the beginning of May 6th, the government finally came with a decision stating that, yeah, there will not be any football possible anymore until July 31st, 2020, which then for the Pro League was a signal for saying, okay, now we can put it to a vote and decide whether we want to cancel or not the championship, because now, since the government has stated that we have to stop playing, there is definitely force majeure, because we are obligated to, we are forced to stop footballing, and there is a foreign decision forcing us to stop, and we are now in the absolute impossibility to remain our football activities. Then it came to a vote in the General Assembly of the Pro League on May 15, 2020, where it was then eventually decided that the the professional football championships would be terminated, and that the ranking as it stands after 29 rounds would be the one taken into account, meaning this is the ranking that decides that the first team at the moment, Club Brugge, becomes champion. This is the ranking that will decide which teams will play European football, and this is the ranking which will then also decide which team relegates, being the last team in the ranking at that time. So it was also decided at that day that all professional football stopped, but that 2 more games would be able to be played, being the cup final, which was also still scheduled, and the promotion final in 2nd division to decide which team would go to 1st division. Since that originally football was suspended until July 31st, 2020, they had to find a day to play these games after July 31st. So they took August 1st to play the cup final and August 2nd to play the promotion final. Now, more recently, on June 3rd, the government announced that as from July 1st, football games would in fact be allowed again as from July 1st, and that even a limited amount of attendance would be allowed during these matches, being 200 people. It has also been announced that as from August 1st, today, in fact, it has been announced that as from August 1st, 800 attendees will be allowed during games, which is a nice prospect because the upcoming 2020-21 season might be able to kick off in August 2020, and then there will be attendees, so that's really nice. But of course, not everybody is happy with the decisions that were being taken by the Pro League to cancel the season, but I think we will go into this later. So this for now, at this moment, the championship is still cancelled and the cup final and the promotion game will be played. Thank you.
Thank you, Quinten. It's interesting to see how different both countries acted, at least in the beginning. As you mentioned, the decision was taken to an assembly to decide. And apparently in France, it was more of an imposed decision than a discussed decision. And this leads to the following question, being how did stakeholders as clubs, sponsors, broadcasters, as you mentioned, the force majeure issue as a point for them to avoid contractual obligations and penalties, but how did those take the decision of the early termination in the country with all of this commercial aspect attached to it, match day attendance, TV broadcasts, sponsorship, appearance? How did they take it? We'll go first in France and afterwards Quinten, please.
Well, first, I think I could say no one was happy with the decision to end the championship, because it doesn't go in the direction of the spirit of the game. The fans want to see football, the players want to play, and the broadcaster want to broadcast. Really, and I say even myself as a fan of Stade Rennais, which terminated third of the league and which might play which qualified for the preliminary ground tour of the Champions League for the first time. So a little part of me was happy when was happy to see that Rennes would qualify for the Champions League. But being more serious, of course, I don't think anyone, even the club I support, was happy with the decision. It was always there has been a debate in football, like in every other industry, I think, during the crisis, between the economic rationale and the safety sanitary one. But in football, in sports in general, in football as well, there is not only the economic factor, but as well the social one. Sport is not an economic area like others. People just love watching sport, love playing it. So it was a real bummer, if I could say. So there are drastic consequences for clubs, which are, I think, the stakeholders the most concerned by the stop of the championship. So just to have a little overview of what is the weight and of the football economy in France, I will just say a few budget of French clubs to show what it represents, and also the disparity in French football, which, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why it was so difficult for clubs to agree on what to do next. And I was watching that from an outside point of view, just as a spectator, but I think it went quite wild between some presidents of clubs, and the reason it might be because of the disparities between clubs. So just as an example, Paris Saint-Germain, of course, the richest club in France, like everyone could imagine, had a budget for the 2019-2020 season of more than 600 million euros. Lyon, which comes second, of around 300 million, and Monaco a bit more than 200 million, 220 million. And to compare with the last club in France, the smallest budget in the first league is Nîmes, with 27 million. So it's a huge difference. PSG has a budget almost 30 times higher than Nîmes, sorry. So the average budget for a French club in Ligue 1 is around 100 million. But this figure, in my opinion, doesn't speak well, because of PSG and Lyon are really like balancing, let's say, increasing the average budget. So the median budget, in my opinion, speaks more, and it's between 50 and 65 million. So in France, in First League, we have 10 clubs which have a budget superior to 65 million euros, and 10 clubs with a budget of 50 millions or less. So there are talks, and I think everyone is aware about reducing salaries of the players. And the question is why reducing salaries? Well, because it's one of the biggest loss, I would say, in the balance. It's one of the most important source of payment for clubs. So once again, I'll give you examples. So once again, as you can imagine, there are huge disparities. The biggest salary of the league being a famous football player from the lovely country of André, Neymar, who earns around 3 million gross per month, and the minimum salary being it's important to say per month. The minimum salary being 2,800 euros according to the collective agreement over the French league. So as you can see, 2,800 euros for the minimum salary, 3 million the biggest one. The average salary in the French First League is around 95,000 euros per month. But once again, what's important is the median salary, which is, in my opinion, the most important, and which is 35,000 euros per month. So, meaning you have half of the professional players in first division that earns more than 35 and half that earns less. So the salary mass for clubs represent more or less, I will not bother you with too many figures, but represent more or less half of the budget of the clubs. So between 30% sometimes, and sometimes more than half. So of course, it's an important point to reduce salaries because they represent half of the budget, and why reducing salaries? Because the budget, as I say, it's because the budget was planned at the beginning of the season, but due to COVID-19, the two main broadcasters in France, which are Canal+ and beIN Sport. On a side note, beIN Sport is owned by the same owner of PSG. One could see a little conflict of interest here when the president of Paris Saint-Germain was mandated by the league to negotiate the TV rights. But that's another story. So Canal+ decided to terminate the contract, the broadcast, the TV rights contract it had with the league. And since the payment of the TV rights were made in installments, there is still more than 200 million euros that were due to clubs, to the league, and then distributed to the clubs according to their ranking, and that were not paid, and that will never be paid. So it's 200 million euros of loss. And what happened is that in April, after discussions between 4 presidents of the First League, amongst which the president of Paris Saint-Germain, they made an agreement with the Canal+, and Canal+ agreed to pay a bit more than 40 million euros to the club. And actually, it was not a gift. They are not a bank, as they said, and it was to pay for the games that were played already before the interruption of the season, the games that were played. So I think from February to beginning of March. And so, yeah, I am not sure if clubs already received this money, but it has to be paid normally to the league by Canal+. So here, in my opinion, are the two most important aspects of the impact economy, of the financial impact of the COVID-19. On one hand, how to pay the salaries, because of on the other hand, the massive reduction of incomes due to the end of the TV rights contract. So I can, because I guess we have, if I see in the live comments, many foreigners here. I don't see any name that at least look or sound French. So, and I guess among them are some lawyers. So I can talk about a bit French labor law and how is it possible to reduce salaries in France. So, as you know, players are seen, at least in France, are seen as employees. And of course, there are special, lex specialists, some special law that apply to their employment relationship, but there are also clubs and players are also under the provision of the general labor law. So the basic question would be, can a club unilaterally decide and indeed reduce a player's salary? And the easy answer is no. A club as an employer cannot reduce unilaterally the salary of a player, because the salary of a player is seen as an essential element of the employment relation. Excuse me, I'm just looking at the question. Excuse me, André.
It was just giving context, because I'm sorry to interrupt. What you are addressing relates to this question presented by Isabel Gribel about the effect on the players' deals. It's what you were mentioning. It's just to give context.
How this decision affect for players' deals?
Yeah, exactly where you were.
Okay. Yeah, I see. I will come to that really soon. So, just a question, André, as it's my first show here with you. The questions, do they stay somewhere? They stay in the live comments, right? I can see them after.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So I don't need to answer directly when they pop up.
No. I was just giving context because
yes.
It was already being answered, the question. That's what.
Okay. So sorry for that. It's live. We don't control.
It's all good. It's all perfect.
Okay, so I was saying that the salary cannot be reduced unilaterally because it's an essential element of the employment contract, and it has been decided so by a decision of what can be unilaterally changed by an employer and what cannot has been decided by the decision of the French Cour de Cassation, which is the Supreme Civil Court in 1996. So no, a club, an employer and a club a fortiori cannot reduce the salary unilaterally. And as you know, in football, players are not under a permanent contract, but under like a short-term contract. And the direct consequence for if a club would unilaterally reduce a player's salary would be for the player to sue his club. Could be for the player to sue his club if he's a French player before the French Labor Court, and if he's a foreign player before FIFA. And the player would be normally he would be granted the amount corresponding to the salaries until the end of his contract. So clubs, the conclusion of that is that no, clubs cannot reduce the salaries of the players. However, as pointed out in the comment, we clubs as well are in an extraordinary situation, and the government, the French government, decided to actually not create a system, but to make his application and to extend the scope of this system, not only to football, of course, but to every businesses in France. This system is called activité partielle in French, but people call it actually chômage partiel, which would be translated as a partial activity or partial unemployment. So this system is actually meant to help financially companies that are suffering during COVID-19 because they have to stop their activity because of the restriction, and football clubs are amongst them because of course the league stopped, and no revenues, no ticketing, no TV rights, and so clubs applied. I think all, if not most clubs in France applied to this system. So not entering too much into the details, what does the system offer? So a company that is meeting the necessary requirements can apply to the partial activity framework, and what will happen is that they will pay only 70%. Better said, salary employees and players would receive 70% of their net salary, and so around 84% of their gross and of their net salary, and the state is paying for those salaries up to 4.5 up to the amount that corresponds to 4.5 minimum salaries in France, so around 7,000 euros gross is paid directly by the state to employees of companies that stopped their activity during COVID. So just to give you an idea, this amount represented during April and May around 1 billion euros per day that was paid by the French state directly to employees. Basically, the state is paying the salary of the employee in place of the club and of the employer. So 7,000 euros gross per month, and of course, it's not going to pay the salary of Neymar. And actually, for those of you who are familiar with the system in Spain, it's quite similar to what is called ERTE in Spain. And there are some questions that, will the Spanish government pay for the salary of Messi? Well, of course not. And it's the same in France with the salary of Neymar. So, but still around 7,000 euros per month. Which is not enough for players in first league, but is enough for players in second league, I would say, because the average salary of a player in second league is around 10,000 euros per month. So this system was used by the clubs in second league and to actually quite reduce the economic impact of the crisis with the salaries. However, for higher salaries in the first division, of course, it was not enough. And there was an agreement made between the Players Union, UNFP, in France, and the clubs. An agreement that was made, I think, in April. And unfortunately, it's not public. And this agreement was made to reduce proportionally and the salary of the players. So, for instance, under 10,000 euros per month, no reduction. Between 10,000 and 20,000, I think 20% reduction, and it would go up to 50% reduction above, I think, 50,000 euros per month. I'm not sure about the amount. So it was decided between the Players Union and the club's representative. But it had still to be agreed by the players, because as I said in the beginning, it's not because an agreement is made between the union, at least in football, between the union and the clubs, that the players have to accept it and that it applies directly to the players. And I think some players, once again, I don't have privileged information, but some players accepted to reduce their salaries, and some players did not. And it might lead to some legal action between clubs and players in the future. For now, I'm not aware of any, but it can happen. So just another important thing, in order to help clubs to face the crisis, there was a loan was made by the league to the state. A loan was made to a bank and was warranted by the state, a loan of 225 million euros. So money given to the league, which I know has already been distributed to at least some clubs in order to help them. This loan is basically made to, in a way, replace the loss of the TV rights and to help the club going through the crisis until the new season starts. And there is a new deal in France for the next season. It will not be anymore. The main broadcaster will not be anymore Canal Plus. It will be Mediapro, a Spanish group, and it's a historic deal. Originally, I don't know if there will be an impact now and if the deal will be decreased, but the original deal was more than 1 billion euros per season paid by Mediapro to the league. And in my opinion, that's the main reason why Canal Plus was so eager and had no really empathy to terminate the TV rights agreement, because Canal Plus has been for 35 years the historical broadcaster of the league. And the league decided to stop actually the collaboration with Canal Plus to go with Mediapro. So, for instance, in rugby, Canal Plus was helping and was ready to help the clubs and the rugby league. But with football, they just said, "Okay, we terminate the contract, and now you didn't want to be with us next season. So now, good luck." That's basically what happened. The reason for some clubs, and sorry, Andre, I will just check if maybe we talk about that a bit later. Yeah, we will talk about that a bit later about the legal action. But just to finish and to introduce maybe the next topic, the legal actions, the reason were twofold. On the one hand, the sporting reason. So basically, as you can imagine, Rennes, Stade Rennais did not start legal action. Paris Saint-Germain neither. And the clubs that started are actually the clubs that were relegated. And most famously, Lyon, Olympique Lyonnais, via his president Jean-Michel Aulas, started some legal action. And because of sporting reason, being relegated or not participating in the UEFA competition, but also for economic reason, because as the Lyon president said, we are basically committed suicide, he said, by terminating the league, especially because there are other leagues in Europe, other major leagues, Germany, England, Spain, and Italy, did not terminate. So they continue to receive TV rights, and he was rightly or wrongly, maybe I would have to agree with him on this point, scared that the gap between France and their other four major rich leagues would increase because of that. So that's the two reasons that led to legal actions: sporting reason and economic reasons. I think that's all for me for now.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for the explanation, which is very. It takes time, and it's important to properly conduct the events and the legal aspects of it, the legal security of players, not to have their contracts simply cut in half the amounts that this demands the acceptance of players. And all of these aspects, we are under, how can I put it? We are under exceptional circumstances, but basic rights need to be respected. And France, being a country that inspired the legal systems of so many countries in the world with that respect, is a ground for a lot of discussions related to basic rights. And now I invite Quinten for his impressions on how clubs, sponsors, and broadcasters, stakeholders involved, took the decision in a different approach, because from what you anticipated, they were at least invited to share their opinion before a decision was taken. How did it happen in Belgium?
So in Belgium, during the suspension, there were three things clubs could do. So as from in between the period from March 12 until May 15, when the championship was just suspended, clubs had in fact three things they could do. Being one, they just pay out all the contracts to their players. Two, they suggest a reduction in salary to the players, but they can, like in France, they cannot impose a mandatory reduction, so they would have to negotiate with each player separately. Or third option would be to make use of the state mechanism of temporary unemployment, which is similar to the system Hugo in France explains that the mutual obligations of the clubs and the players are suspended amongst each other. So the player doesn't have to provide services to the club, doesn't have to train, doesn't have to play games. And on the other hand, the club also doesn't have to pay salary. And the player will then be provided with a salary provided by the state, which would be around 2,200 euros gross. So that's a very low amount. So, of course, many players were suggested to take the accepted cuts, which could vary from 25% to 50% for 1 or 2 months, depending on how well the players or their agent negotiated for them. With respect then to what will happen now that the league effectively has been terminated, then on May 15, so the day upon which the season was terminated, in the same General Assembly, they also prepared how the financial repercussions of this termination would be. So the General Assembly has then voted in favor of some kind of solidarity mechanism, a solidarity fund, from which teams that are suffering financially from the early termination of the season, from which they then each will get a contribution. The fund is funded by the clubs who will play European football, and partly also by a contribution of the Royal Belgian Football Association. It is interesting to know that in order to be eligible to receive money from this Solidarity Fund, that clubs who in the past have making use of the temporary unemployment mechanism, so who have used state money to pay their players' contracts, those clubs are not eligible to get a chunk out of the Solidarity Fund. This last measure was mainly created from the idea that professional football in Belgium already sometimes is frowned upon because they have a lot of tax and social benefits. So it would be not really, how do you say, it would be too rich if clubs could rely on state money to pay their player contracts and then on top receive money out of a solidarity fund. So the clubs who get money from this fund get amounts ranging from 100,000 euro up to approximately 800,000 euro, and the amount that each club gets is based upon if the season had gone forward, would the club still have home games to play in which it could gain income? Would it still have a chance to fight for European football? Yes or no? Would it then get better European qualification spots and therefore higher revenue? So based upon this, a team will get a higher or a lower amount out of this solidarity fund. From the first division, there are only 2 clubs who made use of the system of temporary unemployment. So there are only 2 teams who put their players on a gross salary of 2,200 euro. All the other clubs will be able to get money from the Solidarity Fund. So this is with respect to clubs, how they managed to deal with it. With respect to broadcasters, the broadcasters have actually asked for a refund, of a part of their 2019-2020 media rights license fee for the period that corresponds to the playoffs that would be played after the 30th game of the regular season. Now, the problem with this is that the Pro League already received this installment, so the money was already paid by the broadcasters to the Pro League. And as for now, the Pro League allegedly has denied the broadcasters' request to refund this amount of money, since there would have been a contractual clause in the broadcasting agreement that would cover the Pro League in the event of force majeure. But at this stage, it is not really known whether there are negotiations going on or whether a procedure will follow. So no news there yet. And with respect to sponsors, I think this is being negotiated between the clubs, but there's no real public information about this. So the main information to be provided here is that clubs take different measures in order to provide salaries to their players. And most clubs opted for proposed salary reductions to their players because of the reputation of Belgian football, and it would not be good to let the state pay players money while clubs always already get huge tax reductions in daily life outside COVID times. So that's a brief overview of how, from commercial scope, the stakeholders reacted to the suspension and eventually the termination of the championship.
That's very, very interesting. I for one, did not know that the Belgian FA and the Belgian League had come up with a solidarity system among the clubs. This shows the union in this time of need, which is a very interesting approach to overcome the problem. And also regarding broadcasters, it's funny what you both mentioned. First, Canal Plus not feeling the will to assist French league and French clubs, and the broadcaster in Belgium requesting for these payments back because they did not broadcast any matches. We have a similar discussion going on in Brazil right now, where the biggest broadcaster we have, which is Globo, that has been broadcasting football for as long as I can remember at least, they bought the TV rights from FIFA, from every match organized by FIFA. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of matches were suspended, canceled, or postponed in relation to qualifying to the World Cup or even other friendly matches. And Globo requested, on the Brazilian case, the payment was to be done in installments. So there are still installments pending, and Globo requested for some of the installments not to be paid because no games were being broadcasted. It was their arguing. But FIFA denied it, and we are about to see an important clash, legal clash in Brazil, because, as I said, Globo has been the broadcaster for a long, long time, at least 30 years, and of every football competition, especially the World Cup. And now they are arguing that with FIFA, and at the moment we also have not a law, but a decree, a presidential decree that allows clubs to negotiate their broadcasting rights individually and even to broadcast their matches their own without the need of a broadcaster. So it's a tough time for broadcasting in Brazil at the moment. A lot of legal discussions will arise. Maybe some new players will jump in. The COVID-19 and the current situation are inviting for new forms of broadcasting or new ways of broadcasting. Just taking this hoop on the subject. And on the commercial side are the elements you mentioned, and also on the competitive side, as Hugo mentioned, the clubs that qualified to European competition with the league ending as it is did not complain at all, but other clubs who were trying to qualify did. Also, the relegation battle, clubs were denied the right to fight relegation. In some countries, clubs were even denied the right to fight promotion. The league ended as it was, and the first team was elected or chosen to go to the first division. In Belgium, you're still having this match in August, hopefully with public, because football with public, it's better than what we currently have. And I would like to know, how are these discussions coming along, both in France and in Belgium? Clubs feeling they were denied the right to compete, which is an essential element of the sport, and the financial aspect related to it. If a club plays European competition, it gains way more money than a club that doesn't. If a club is relegated, it earns a lot less than it would if it wasn't, or promoted, vice versa. So I would like to know how this happened in both countries, and if clubs acted somehow against these measures with legal action, administrative measures. Please, Hugo, if you'll explain France, and then Quinten, Belgium.
Thank you, Andre. So yeah, no big suspense, because I think some of you at least are aware, and plus we discussed it in introduction, that there have been some legal action, some legal remedies taken by some French clubs against different decisions of the league and of the federation. Just as a little introduction, this is not a public law masterclass, but just for people to understand how it works in France. So in France, we have a system which is not present, doesn't exist in every country. So we have, on the one hand, the civil law, like private law branch of justice, and on the other hand, the public law, administrative law branch of justice, because the federation in France received power from the Ministry of Sport, delegation of power from the Ministry of Sport. The decisions of the federation and of the league, which is an organ that is not really independent from the federation, are seen as administrative decisions. And therefore, the appeal, the remedy against those decisions must be done before the administrative courts. So I will briefly, I will not be able to talk about all the legal remedies that were taken, because it's been already 1 hour almost we're talking, and and there have been too many, but I will just mention a few briefly. So not to forget the second league. So as I said before, in League 2, the end of the season was pronounced at the same time as for League 1, and there are still 10 games to be played. So there are several legal actions that were taken by clubs such as Ajaccio, who finished third of the league. And let me just check quickly the table, but it was really, really close to finish second and thus to get promoted. Yeah, it was 1 point behind Lens. Actually, Lorient won with 54 points. The second was 53, and the third 52. And so, as you can see, really tight. And so Ajaccio started legal action, but more, which is more interesting for me, is the two teams that were supposed to be relegated, Le Mans and Orléans, so 19th and 20th of League 2, were supposed to be relegated in the third division, which is a huge decision, because only the first two divisions are professional. So when a club is relegated to a third division, has to drastically reduce its budget and its salaries, because third division games are not broadcasted except for cup games, and so of course clubs receive way less incomes. So what happened is that there was a decision made by the assembly, the General Assembly of the League, on May the 20th, and the vote was not a unanimous vote, but 57%, a majority of 57% of the members of the General Assembly of the League voted in favor of keeping Le Mans and Orléans in the second league for the next season. How? By deciding that the next season would have 22 clubs instead of 20. And because, of course, not denying the right of the clubs in the third division to join, to promote the second league. What happened is that 1 week later, so on 27th of May, the executive committee of the federation, so once again, not entering too much into details, but the federation has the power to overrule decision made by the league according to the statutes. So the executive committee of the federation decided to actually suspend and to overrule this decision, and deciding that the League 2 would remain with 20 clubs for the next season, and thus that Le Mans and Orléans would be relegated. Why such a decision? In my opinion, is because the president of the French Federation, didn't want to have a disparity between what happened in the lower division of the leagues of the federation, because actually from grassroots into third division there were promotion and relegation. So in his opinion and the opinion of the federation, it would be not fair that to maintain a League 2 with 22 clubs. Plus there is like 22 clubs. It means 42 games, so 4 more games, so 1 more month, more or less, of competition, and so the federation decided to overrule this decision. And both Le Mans and Orléans contested the decision of the French Federation. So once again, not entering too much into details, but there is a specific remedy that is compulsory in sport for decision of sporting federation and sporting bodies in France. A club cannot directly go before the administrative tribunal, but has first to go before what is called, and I will try to translate that in English, the National Committee of the Olympic National Committee of French Sport, CNOSF, for the French speaking people who are watching. And so the CNOSF disregarded the remedy and the appeal, if I can say so, of those 2 clubs only a few days ago, on 19th of June. And the clubs didn't say publicly if they will bring the case to the Conseil d'État, which is the highest administrative court in France, or not, but they still have, because they have a 2 weeks deadline to do it, so until beginning of July. So this is for League 2. And for the first league, as I said, the 3 clubs who took legal action against the decision of the league were Lyon. Main reason is, in my opinion, because they didn't qualify for the European competition, which would be a first since 1996. So it's been 24 years in a row that Olympique Lyonnais has been participating in the European competition, and so it would be a first. And during all those years, it was the same president, so it would be his first as well. His first year without European competition. So were made by Lyon and by the 2 teams that were relegated, Amiens and Toulouse. So this recourse was not made against the decision of the federation, but against the decision of the league to suspend, to terminate the first league, and to freeze and to keep this table. So, and once again, we are in a good timing because the decision of the State Council arrived 2 weeks ago on 9th of June. And basically, so not to repeating myself a bit, but the State Council, Conseil d'État in French, is the highest administrative court. So the only recourse against the decision is before the European Court of Human Rights, but I don't see that happening here. And so the State Council decided that the decision of the league to end the season was legal, and but the State Council the court considered that the decision of relegating Amiens and Toulouse in second league didn't have a legal base. And here it's an interesting point. I think most of the people here watching might be lawyers, or at least have interest in law. So we are sometimes a bit nerds, but I think it's interesting to look at that. So the legal base actually of the league to say that how to say it easily. So the legal base of according to the league had to relegate Amiens and Toulouse in League 2 because not doing so would have the consequences of having a first league with 22 clubs. And the league said, and if you remember well, I said that the League 2 voted to have next season with 22 clubs. So why not? Why the League 1 couldn't do it? Because actually there is a convention between the federation and the league, and in this convention, it says that so the convention is made for the federation to delegate the rights to the league, and one of those rights is the organization of professional competition. And in this convention, it says that the second league is a competition, group competition with teams which between 16, a group competition which has between 16 and 22 teams, whereas the first league should have between 18 and 20 teams. So that's why the league said we cannot have 22 teams for next year because of the convention. But the interesting point again is that the convention is arriving to an end. At the term of the convention is 30th of June this year. The convention was made in 2016 for 4 years. So the State Council, being precise, say actually you're not correct because this convention will not have legal force, will not be in force anymore for the next season. So you could theoretically have 22 teams next year. It's up to you and the federation and to include this in the next convention, but you cannot say because the convention prohibits to have 22 teams and the convention is being terminated at the end of June. So what happened next is that, so this decision, as I said, from 9th of June. And so on 19th of June, the board of the league voted a resolution to propose to the General Assembly to keep, of course, they're not going to contradict themselves, to keep the same format of League 1 for the next season, so with 20 clubs. And on 20, so this resolution was adopted unanimously, actually 23 votes in favor and 2 abstentions. And in 23rd of June, the General Assembly, so 23rd of June is yesterday, yes, yesterday, the General Assembly of the League adopted this resolution with 75% of the votes. So it's not over yet because on Friday this week, the General Assembly of the Federation this time has to accept and has to give legal value to this decision. But Amiens already said that they will take legal action against the decision of the federation on Friday if the federation would confirm the fact that the first league would stay with 20 clubs. So it's not the end of those legal actions. And just to terminate here, there are actually two different kinds of legal action. I said before that the two consequences of terminating the football season were sporting on one hand and economic on the other hand. Well, it's the same for the legal action. The legal action that were taken so far are, to say so, sporting legal action. They aim to invalidate the decision of the league in the sense that it impacts the table, and so that it relegates a club, that it prevents a club to play to play the Champions League. So those are the legal actions that were taken so far, which are considered as urgent because, of course, the decision have to be confirmed or dismissed before the start of the next season. You cannot have teams that start in August or in September in the second league and then, oh, okay, finally you can join the first league. It's impossible. Or same with Lyon, if in December the court said, oh yes, you can play Champions League. Well, it's a bit too late. So those decisions are urgent character, and that's why they're being dealt with really fast by the State Council. But no matter what other, I would say, the last urgent decision rendered, the clubs will still have the possibility to intend legal action, but this time on the economic consequences, meaning that they would look for some damages. And well, obviously it's linked with the fact of being relegated or of not accessing Champions League, or of not being promoted for Ajaccio, for instance. But those decisions, they will not change the table. The decision that will be rendered, for instance, next year or in 2 years, they will not change the ranking of the league, but they could just give, they could just award damages to, for instance, Amiens and Toulouse, if the state council, which will be once again the last instance to rule, if it decides yes, of course, being relegated caused a lot of losses economically, not only sportively, a lot of losses, and if the decision was not grounded, because, and this one in my opinion is the most interesting one, the league and the federation could have decided to have 22 clubs in first league and in second league next year. And so the fact that they said no and they kept 20 teams, and to have 2 teams relegated, being relegated to second league, and then 2 teams being relegated from second league to third league, I think those 4 teams could have chances to get damage, to receive money for their economic losses due to those decisions. And so in law, in French law, it's called perte de chance. So basically the loss of a chance of staying in first division, loss of a chance of playing the last game. Once again, there are still 10 games remaining, so 30 points to be given. If we are a bit pragmatic, I would say that Toulouse, with 13 points after 28 games, even though they're not mathematically relegated, had not a big chance to end at the 17th, at the 18th or up in the league. But if we look at the ranking of the other teams, I mean, just let me open it and I will tell you right now. Amiens had 23 points and Nîmes, the 18th, 27. So 4 points behind, 10 games to be played. They could have terminated 18th or even above and still save themselves, if I could say, and stay in the first league. And if we look at the second league, and I will finish here, Orléans, 19 points. Okay, Le Mans 26 points. So Orléans last 20th, 7 points from Le Mans. But Le Mans 26 points being relegated to third division, and Niort 26 points as well being saved because they have a goal difference of -11 and Le Mans -15. So 10 games to be played, 4 goal differences, and that's it. So legally speaking, there was still a huge chance for Le Mans to stay in second league. So I think their action have some good chances to succeed.
Yeah, thank you for the impressions, Hugo. And it is indeed an urgent matter because next season will start, and depending on what's decided, this changes the outcome. Here in Portugal, we had the example of Gil Vicente, a club that was actually sanctioned and relegated because of that. And then the sanction was judged unjust. So they were already in third division when that happened, and they gained the right to play first division. So more teams were relegated that season and more teams promoted. Gil Vicente on that occasion joined the teams from second division that should go up to the first. And financial compensation is always a possibility, be it against the league, against the federation. It doesn't change the competitive aspect, but it remedies financially the loss suffered by the club. I would like to know from Quinten the situation in Belgium, since there all of the clubs appear to take part on the decision, if measures were taken against, if Bruges would be the undenied champion either way, even if there was a playoff. How did that play in Belgium?
So in Belgium, as from the moment championships were suspended in March, evidently many discussions arose as to which final decision had to be taken. Should the league be terminated? Should the last game of the regular season be played? Can the playoff rounds be played? What about the cup final and the promotion final of second division? So when on 15 May, the General Assembly of the Pro League finally came together, there were several talking points and different points of view that were on the table, and there had to be found a big majority in order to get these changes through. So some smaller teams, they were mostly in favor of increasing temporarily for a few seasons, to increase the number of teams in the league from the original 16 teams up to maybe 18 or even 20 teams, which would then imply that this season no teams would relegate. 1 or 2 teams from second division would be promoted, and no teams would be relegated from first division. Others then said, if no team would be relegated, then there should also not be a champion crowned either. And then bigger teams were mostly in favor of at least keeping the current amount of 16 teams of the league for next year, relegating the lowest ranked team, as would always be the case after 30 rounds, but then maybe temporarily for the next seasons abandon the playoff system in a certain way, or make some amendments that the league would be, from a physical point of view, maybe not too harsh, or that all teams can take part in the league as long as possible and not just the teams playing in the playoff rounds. And if between all those options no decision could be taken, then of course the only solution that was there was to void the championship, which means that there was no championship, no relegation, and no promotion from second division to first division. So this was always some kind of, I won't say blackmail, but some of argument that people could have to say, yeah, if you don't follow my reasoning in this, we maybe void the season, so you better follow me in this argumentation and vote for this decision. And additionally to what would happen with this season and next season, there were, of course, the questions, is there a cup final possible? Yes. When? Because at the time, there was still a prohibition of football on July 30th until July 31st, while the next season have to start in August. So if there will be games played, when will they be played? So long story short, there were many different views, but only one could be taken. And in the end, it was decided then that there would be a champion, there would be a relegation, there would be a stop of the league after 29 days, with a cup final to be held on August 1st and a promotion final to be held on August 2nd. Of course, the fact that there will be a relegation, that means that a team will be relegated, and this team, the team that was ranked lowest after 29 days, still had a little chance to save itself and stay in first division. So of course, this team wasn't happy and not in favor of the current decision that was taken. So in view of this, a shareholder of Waasland Beveren, which is the team that was the lowest in the rank, a shareholder initiated proceedings before the Belgian Competition Authority. And this case is currently ongoing. The hearing of this was held last week, and a decision is to be expected within 3 weeks, but it is expected that it will be rather sooner than later, because the next season has to be organized. And the argumentation before the Belgian Competition Authority would be that by taking a decision such as the Pro League has done, following which a team should be relegated as consequence of the early termination of the season, it is to be looked at that such decision results in the exclusion of a competitor, and because of that, this decision restricts competition and is contrary to competition law. Now, the hearing took place last week, and it is interesting to note that during this hearing, the Pro League already tried to anticipate on the illegality of the decision they took, meaning they asked on the hearing expressly that if the competition authority would decide that it was an illegal decision to take to end the season already and relegate the last team, then the Pro League asked that at least they would give the possibility to still play the last 30th game of the regular season. Because if 30 games would be played, then number 16 would be relegated based upon a sporting merit, and the competition would be preserved. There are also some other proceedings still going on, for example, before the Belgian Court of Arbitration for Sports. However, they do not really relate directly to the early termination of the season. So I won't really go into further detail there. With respect to the financial repercussions of the decision that has been taken to terminate the season, I already addressed this in the Solidarity Fund. So some teams get some money from the fund, others don't because they made use of the state mechanism. So for time restricting reasons, I'll leave it here.
Okay, thank you for your impressions. It's interesting to see how neighboring countries deal with the situation in such different manners. But very interesting to see how a potential same starting point, which was the determination of the ending of the league, resulted in so much different aspects, not only because of the size of the league, the numbers of teams competing, but also because of the number of rounds left to be played. One round left leaves, even if it leaves some discussion, it leaves less discussion than 10 rounds left. And we have a question from Omar that we addressed earlier on regarding broadcasting and sponsorship rights for the following season. In France, they just changed the broadcaster, and the outcomes of that are to be seen, because they're buying a product that we expect to be played and advertised and broadcasted, which is the 2021 season. It should maybe start later, but it should start either way. And For our final remarks, because of a time limit aspect, and thank you all for participating and sharing your thoughts and your comments, participating with us in that discussion. We are the three with cameras on, but everyone that's participating through comments are as if they were on the same round table and sharing impressions and presenting ideas and receiving answers to possible questions. I invite you both, Hugo and Quinten, to, on final remarks, talk about the landscape for the following season and for the return of football, that even though the leagues ended, there are still cup matches to be played, and how is the next season being thought? And especially to Quinten on his remarks, a question from Lucho that I will put it on here. This idea comes along every now and then about having a common championship with Belgium, the Netherlands, and eventually even Luxembourg. How is this discussed if COVID and the effect that this brings new ideas in, if that discussion has progressed or not, if countries and their federations still think of a national product instead of a regional product with neighboring countries. So before Hugo and afterwards Quinten with the landscape for the future and your final remarks. And once again, thank you very much for your participation and your thoughts. I know I learned a lot. Everyone that followed learned a lot as well. Thank you. Hugo, the floor is yours.
Okay, Andre. So, and I would, how to say that? We still don't know when the league is supposed to start, if I don't say any mistake. Normally, end of August. Normally, the French league starts the first weekend of August, but I think this year they want to postpone it because of COVID. The idea is to start the league with some fans in the stadium. Of course, everything is an hypothesis now because we don't know if there will be a second wave, finger crossed, but the second wave of COVID hitting France and the rest of Europe. So the last decision of the government was to open stadiums with a maximum capacity of 5,000 spectators starting for the next season. 5,000 spectators in a 10,000 stadium or in a 50,000 seat stadium is not the same. So no more, I think a percentage of the stadium capacity would have been a better solution, but I think it was just an announcement of the government to maybe calm or like reconfort clubs, saying they will be able normally to welcome fans. So as you said, Andre, there are still 2 games to be played. Actually, the 2 finals, the final of the French Cup, which will take place normally on 24th of July. So both finals generally take place in the Stade de France in Paris. I just checked before the live today, and apparently maybe the final of the French Cup would have 25,000 people in the stadium. So just to have an idea, Stade de France can normally welcome at its full capacity around 90,000 people. So it would be around a bit more than 25%, between 25 and 30%. And so yes, it's 24th of July and then 31st of July. Why those dates? It's because the UEFA said that all domestic championships should end before the 3rd of August in order to start the qualifying games for the next UEFA competition. So because in France, the winner of the French Cup is directly qualified to Europa League, and the winner of the League Cup is qualified to the preliminary round of the Europa League preliminary tour. So the 2 finals, the French Cup is Paris Saint-Germain against Saint-Etienne, and the other one is Paris Saint-Germain against Lyon. So in case Saint-Etienne and Lyon would win, they would be able to play in Europa League, so which would be very important for them sportively and economically, because none of those teams are so far qualified through their ranking in the table. So yes, we should have games in 1 month in France, and the season will start, but we don't know yet with fans. Normally yes, but we don't know yet with how many fans. And I saw a question popping up, and I will just answer it a bit briefly. It's the question of Omar Sameh, if the league cancellation will have an effect on future sponsorship. There are different ways to answer that question. I would say the fact that the French league cancelled, maybe sponsors will be afraid that the French league is able to cancel again, because not being pessimistic here, but there might be another COVID next year. I mean, we don't know. Yeah, maybe like it would make precedent the fact that the French league terminated and not the Premier League or other European leagues. So I don't know. It might be interesting to see. And as for the next season, I don't think so far the TV rights are being reduced. Because why they would be if the next season is played normally? Okay, one thing could be the fact that the stadium will not be full, but one can argue then if people are not in the stadium, they are watching the game at home, so more fans. So maybe actually an increase of TV rights. I think it's really arguable, debatable, and it depends on many factors. That's all for me. Thank you, André.
Thank you very much, Hugo, and for your impressions and your thoughts on the subjects presented. France is the birthplace of rights and legal systems, so it's always important to have a perspective on the French ruling and aspects. And with that topic, France and Belgium there could not be any better example than these two countries. And I would like to listen from Quinten from the landscape, and reminding about Lucho's question for a championship with the neighboring countries.
So for the return of football, of course, as for now, the first matches that would return would be the Cup final on the 1st of August and the promotion playoff game on the 2nd of August. And depending on the outcome of the Belgian competition authorities' decision, maybe they squeeze in the last game of the regular season, who knows? But this remains to be seen. With respect then to the two games, the Cup final and the promotional game, they had to amend the regulation because, of course, at June 30, all player contracts normally would expire. And now suddenly there are games to be played in August 1st and August 2nd. So originally the regulations were amended saying that it should be played with new lineups, meaning it was allowed to field new players that were transferred after June 30, 2020. But on June 9, FIFA has said, no, you cannot do it. It has to be played with the original squads of the 2019-2020 season. And that new players cannot be included. Of course, from a competitive point of view, this is logic because it pertains to the 2019 season, so it should also be with these players. But of course, players' contracts expire on June 30, so hopefully these teams manage to extend the contracts for another month, because it's up to each players individually to agree or not agree in extending these contracts. So if many players leave the club, then in the end, there will not be a lot of players left to play the cup final or the promotion final. So it remains to be seen what happens there. With respect to the next season, there have been some amendments in the playing format. So normally it's 16 teams who then after 30 games play a playoff with the 6 best teams. Now the playoff round has been changed from 6 to only 4 teams, so as opposed to the normal of 6. And in the second division, they will also just play 28 games between the 8 teams, and the winner will be the champion, and hence the team that will be promoted to first division at the end of the 2020-2021 season. At present, the Pro League is putting together the calendar for next year, for the next season, and it is to be expected that first division recommences on August 7th, 2020. So any possible last round of the current season has to be played before August 7th. And the second division would start in the weekend of August 21st, if I'm not mistaken. So for next season, the format has changed a little bit, but in the end, it just starts as usual. It will not start later, at a later moment in time. And also with respect to broadcasting and TV rights, this will not have any effect, I think, because the broadcaster for next year is a different one than the one with this year. So even if there would be disputes about the reimbursement of the money of the current broadcaster, this doesn't affect the rights of the next broadcaster because they are not that related with each other. So it's expected on August 7th, first division starts again, and this will probably be with 800 people in the stadiums. This at present, this is what the maximum is. Maybe in a month they will put this higher. For some clubs in first division, there are not even 800 persons attending the stadium in general, so this won't be that much of a problem. Then with respect to the question of Lucho, it's already these talks about should there be a Dutch and Belgian competition. It's already going on for 4 years, and now and then the idea pops up, then it goes away a bit. But now I think, if I'm not mistaken, Deloitte is looking into it, is doing a study whether it would be feasible and what the benefits could be from going together. And apparently it would increase the income with 35% to do it. But this doesn't mean that there will effectively come a Dutch and Belgian competition together, because apparently it's only in Flanders really that teams would want it, so the north of Belgium, but the French-speaking part of Belgium in the south isn't really too happy about it, I think. And also in the Netherlands, they are not really jumping with joy for this idea, because I don't know, it's probably a nationality feeling, something like that. But if it would happen at this moment in time, there are being talks held about a league with maybe 10 Dutch teams and 8 Belgian teams, and there would be benefits with respect to income, but based upon national feelings and stuff like that, it remains to be seen if such decision ever will be taken.
Thank you very much, Quinten, for your impressions and for sharing with us the organization of Belgian football, the success we see of Belgian teams in club competition and of the Belgium national team goes along with the organization of the country. And I think this evening we all saw how things are dealt seriously and with the participation of everyone in Belgium, of all the parties involved. And the spectacle gains with that, public, everyone, and we can see these effects on every level, with more and more Belgian players being top earning players, top quality players. The system works as a whole. When it's good for everyone. And I thank you both for sharing your impressions, for comparing the systems and presenting its characteristics. And thank you all for following us in this show. It was a bit longer than usual, but the subject was too interesting, too many things to be said. So I thank you for following us and invite you to follow our weekly shows every week. There's at least one new show with a different topic with myself and Lucho Mazzei. And thank you. See you soon. Bye.